Good morning, good afternoon, and good day wherever you may be joining from. Welcome to another edition of the Digital Download, which is
The
the longest running weekly
weekly business
business
talk
talk show
show
on
on
LinkedIn
LinkedIn
Live. Now globally
syndicated.
syndicated on TuneIn Radio. We'll get you there, guys. We'll get you there.
You won't.
I think the challenge with this
No.
is just we need to practice it enough, and like everyone has a delay, and then you're like, "Am I saying it at the same time as Rob?" I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's the challenge, isn't it? The challenge is it's the longest running weekly business. Yeah.
It's just not the most pleasant echo. You know what we should do is we should like pre-record all of us saying it together, and then you can just play it, Rob.
Yes.
As soon as you get it, I'm going to change it anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, probably.
We'll be syndicated in more places.
There we go. Good morning, Bertrand.
Good morning. Sorry for being late.
No worries. So today we're explaining why your startup approach won't work in a developing nation. We have a special guest, Donna Rosa, to help us with the discussion. Let me try that one again. Nope. We're live. A humanitarian award winner and founder of E4 Enterprises. Donna has extensive experience working with micro enterprises and small businesses in emerging economies. But before Donna comes on, let's go around the set and introduce everyone. While we're doing that, why don't you in the audience reach out to a friend, ping them, and have them join us? We strive to make the digital download an interactive experience, so audience participation is highly encouraged. Okay, with that, introductions. Tracy, would you kick us off, please?
Oh, backwards. I like it, Rob. Good morning, everybody. I am Tracy Borison. I'm from TLB Coaching and Events, a proud partner of DLA Ignite. I am like freshly back from vacation, so we'll see if my business brain is turned on or if I'm still in vacation mode, but I am excited to be here.
And we're excited to have you back. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Bertrand.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bertrand Godillot. I'm French. I'm not doing any bread today because I've done that last week. So I'm going to be far more relaxed this week. I am a proud DLA partner in France, managing partner of Odysseus & Co. That's me.
Excellent. Welcome. I'm still waiting on my bread, by the way. The postal service is a little slow.
Yeah.
And Adam, good morning and welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite, and this is a new and exciting topic for discussion today, and I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth into this.
As am I. Excellent. Thank you. And myself, I'm Rob Durant, founder of
hold on, before you
Flywheel
say
Results.
That, if Tim was here, he'd say, because I'm going to set you up for this, haven't I? If Tim was here, he would say, hi, I'm Tim Hughes, co-founder of DLA Ignite. I'm famous for writing the book, Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers. Sorry, over to you, Rob.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results, a proud DLA Ignite partner. And I'm not famous for writing anything.
Yet.
Although we're right on the cusp.
Hey.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. All right. As I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Donna Rosa. With more than 2 decades of work in international business, including spending the last decade focused on humanitarian assistance and sustainability, Donna will share with us her expertise in supporting entrepreneurs in developing countries. Let's bring her on. Yay. Donna, good morning and welcome.
Everybody. Hey, guys.
Hi, Donna.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Let's start by having you tell us a little more about you, your background, and what led you to where you are today.
Okay, so I took the scenic route to get where I am today. It was not planned. I spent most of my career in the corporate world, in the food industry. I actually started off in the lab as a food technologist. I also have a background in nutrition. After a while, I went and got my MBA and got onto the business side of the food industry. And then I was going along for years and years. And then I started to wonder what else I could do. I actually had landed a plum assignment in Zurich, Switzerland for some years. And while I was there, the company that I was working for merged with another company, and they closed the office where I came from in the United States, and I was laid off on another continent. So they did manage to get me back to the States, but I started to wonder what else I could do. And it took me a long while, years and years, to figure out, what I wanted to do, how I could leverage that experience. And I wound up in international development, which is what this work is, or you might know it as aid work. And so I decided that I wanted to utilize my business expertise and all my experience helping those who most need it. And these are entrepreneurs in developing countries. And I didn't even know if this was a thing at the time, but it is the thing, and it's growing into an even bigger thing. Not just me, but the industry. So I started doing by doing volunteer assignments, and then in country, mostly in Africa, but in Central America, in the Caribbean, in Eastern Europe, Russia, and a few other places. So I've traveled quite a bit and had some very interesting experiences. And now, in 2020, I opened my business E4 Enterprises, and this is a remote coaching business model. And that came about because I was on an assignment in 2015 and decided that I could do this remotely. Now, this is way before COVID, and I was told it was never going to work. But I wanted to give these entrepreneurs as help over time. Normally in the aid world, they send you in for an assignment, you do the thing, and then you leave, and then that's the end of it. And when you're talking about business support, that's not the best way to go because stuff happens, and these are business. They don't know how to do, make these decisions and whatever. But I did some beta testing and I pursued it anyway. And then in January of 2020, I opened E4. And then, of course, COVID hit. And I thought, what timing? Everybody has to go remote now. And so everything shut down for a few months. Like there was nothing happening, remote or otherwise. But once they started to come back online in May and June, I didn't have to go there about the remote stuff because everybody had to go remote. And yes, it did work. Everybody, so it's not a big deal anymore. So that's what I'm doing now. And, I'm hired by organizations, not the entrepreneurs themselves, but it's the organizations who hire me to work with a group of entrepreneurs or an entrepreneur.
So go on, Rob.
Go ahead, Hedel.
I was going to say, so most of us have travelled, and we've been to developing nations in part of our travels. So, how does being an entrepreneur in a developing nation differ from the UK or the US? Because we're all entrepreneurial to a greater or lesser extent in the developed world, and the paths are very well trodden. So how is it different in a developing nation?
Yeah, where do I start? I would say the most basic difference is the lack of infrastructure. We don't think about in the West the lights going on and off, the power going on and off, the internet going on and off, the fact that the roads, if you want to go somewhere, you get in the car and you go, and in many of the poorer countries, this stuff is a problem and it really affects your productivity. You can imagine you're trying to do something and then the power goes off and you have no control over, when it's going to come back on. And, think about operating a manufacturing facility or any kind of business. When you have these basic things that they get annoying after a while. If there's only dirt roads, when it rains, you're not going anywhere. Your business stops. There's a lot of instability in many of these countries. I was working with someone who she had to shut her business for a couple of weeks because they had an election coming up, and they were anticipating a lot of unrest, and she had to take her money out and get the cash 2 weeks ahead of time that she needed. And so these are things that we don't think about.
Well, joking aside, you might well be thinking about that in the US shortly.
Yeah, we're not immune.
No, but, I mean, without being flippant about stuff, so some of these things are actually insurmountable, or they seem like insurmountable problems, because you talk about the power going on and off, and for me, that would be a bit annoying. So I get cut off here, the power comes back on again in 5 minutes, I switch my computer back on, I log back in, and you guys are further on with the conversation. But it's not been a catastrophic thing. But if I were firing up an electric kiln to glaze pots, or I were doing some injection molding with plastics, or I were mixing cement or something, actually these are catastrophic things that might have a long tail of disruption off the back of them. So is it possible to overcome these things, or is it just the nature of the beast?
Now they have, for example, backup generators. They have figured out how to get around this in many cases, but so they have ways of coping because they've done this before. If the internet goes out, they turn on their phone, or they have ways to cope. But I have seen where they get complacent. I was once in a hotel in Kenya, and the power went off, and they were like, "Well, we don't know what happened. We just have to wait for it to go on." And this went on all day, and I finally had it. And it turned out the problem was not with some central power thing. It was something there. And I insisted that they check it. And it turned out it was something there at the hotel that caused the power to go. And so they get kind of complacent. Well, the power goes off, and it was me insisting that, do something. So, that's a big issue. And they have other problems too in developing countries. They don't have access to good education. They don't have business backgrounds. They don't have access to a business person doesn't have access to help. Here in the United States, we have something called SCORE, which is free business help. You just call them and say, I want a mentor, and they provide it for you. They don't have that. No one teaches them how to run a business. And so they don't have the resources, and they don't have access to finance either. They don't qualify for loans. They don't, there isn't any venture capitalists coming in and giving them money, and they just face problem after problem, and they soldier through.
I guess some of the challenge must also be that they don't have dreams. But by which I mean that in the US, you live in the next street to Mark Zuckerberg, and the next town to Bill Gates, and the 3 streets over is Elon Musk, and these are people that have created vast empires by being able to deploy a good idea. And you can look at, and although these are clearly extremely clever people, whether you like them or not, they're extremely clever people who are extremely committed, who know how to work the system, and etc. etc. But at the beginning, Jeff Bezos was a guy with an idea. He thought, I'm going to sell books because that seems like a good thing for me to sell, and he could reference Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and all of the people that went before him to create businesses. Whereas in a developing nation which has got no roads and malnutrition is a problem and people don't get schooled, then you potentially don't have that vision, do you? Because you can't look at someone and go, well, if you did it, I can do it. Because it's somebody on the other side of the world in a different country with a different infrastructure, with different educational capabilities, with different financing capabilities, and you've got none of that stuff. So how do these people develop a dream? How do they start on this kind of one day I'm going to run my own business journey?
Yeah. They entrepreneurship is a whole different thing in poor countries, in low income countries. They are often referred to as entrepreneurs of necessity or necessity entrepreneurs. And so they are opening a business because they have no other choice. There's no Microsoft out there to hire them. They have to figure out how to sell something. That's it. That's their own. They don't have. And so most of them just, that's what they do. Like that's what everybody around them does. And there's a lot of these small businesses. Some of them do have dreams and some of them do have big ideas. And so we shouldn't sort of generalize. And there's some that get, MBAs and they go on, to be the next hot, techpreneur. But they figure out what can they do and they just open a business and they start selling stuff.
That's what I was. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Bertrand.
No, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I'm just thinking, you need to be a really strong entrepreneur to get started in these countries. At least that's by all the things that you described. I just think it probably takes much more to launch a business in these countries than it actually does, Adam, for someone like Bezos in the US.
Well, actually,
am I wrong? That's the point.
No, it doesn't. It actually doesn't take that much because they're starting at a very low level. I always laugh when I hear about lean startups, and I'm thinking these people invented lean startups, and they're all lean startups. They bootstrap everything. They just dive in and they just start. How do I make this? Who's going to buy it? And they just jump in. It's on a very small, for us, it sounds overwhelming, but they're used to their environment. They're used to doing things and they're extremely creative. You have to be, so they just start selling, they make something and sell it. And that's their business. There's some discussion whether we should call these people entrepreneurs. And there's a school of thought that says an entrepreneur is only someone who comes up with a unique, innovative idea that creates jobs and is sort of larger scale. And these other people are, just business owners. I don't agree with that. I think they're all entrepreneurs, but you'll find that in the literature.
So, Donna, I have a question about the importance of entrepreneurship to the economy, because if we're in a developing economy, then my assumption is that we're trying to boost commercial activity. And so seemingly it's good then to have entrepreneurs who are trying to exchange goods because then it boosts the economy. So from those different parts of the world have different levels of dependency, I guess I would say, on small businesses and entrepreneurs. So how important are these businesses to the local ecosystems?
Yeah, you guys are all asking really good questions. So it's extremely important. And the irony is that these governments don't support these entrepreneurs. You would think, I always say, businesses build economies. That's how countries get developed. That's how any country has gotten developed is in large part by small businesses that grew and created jobs and created tax revenue and whatever. But for some reason, it's not a priority in many of these countries to support these businesses. There's something called formal businesses and in the informal economy. The formal businesses are the ones that are registered and they pay taxes. The informal businesses in most of these places far outnumber the formal ones. So this is the woman selling crafts, or the person selling vegetables, or just design services, or whatever. These informal businesses make up something like 80% of the businesses in these places. And the problem, so in one way, they serve a purpose in that they're providing things that people need. On the other hand, they're not able to access protective, social services. And the governments they're not getting taxed. So while they're not paying taxes, the government is not getting that tax revenue either. And so I can never figure out why they don't facilitate these businesses and help them to get on their feet and growing so that they can get the tax revenue and build their economies. One exception to this is Rwanda, where they have made an effort, a decided effort, and their economy is growing beautifully. And so it's the way it's been, and that's the way that it seems to keep going. And I don't really understand it, but yeah, they would develop much better. Yeah.
Yes, and what can you do to address that? Because there is obviously the micro problem of me not having support starting my business, me having to kind of bootstrap the business, and a super lean startup where I'm growing my own produce and selling it to neighbors. But then there's the macro problem of governments not investing in the infrastructure and the support that these organizations need in order to become large enough and profitable enough to put something back into society as a whole where everybody benefits. So how do you change that? Because that sounds like you've driven into a dead end street, and there's not any obvious way out, is there, from this?
Yeah, it's really up to the government to make it a priority to develop these businesses. And if they don't, they're just doing other things. Some of them are just plain inept. Some of them are corrupt. They're taking money and they're putting it in their pockets. This is common. I hate to say it, but there's a lot of corruption and a lot of funny business going on. And because of this stuff, because they're not supporting entrepreneurs, it prevents investment in their country. Because if you wanted to invest, if you wanted to start a business in one of these countries, you're not going to do it because the risks are way too high, and you're not sure what the rewards are. If they would just stabilize things and encourage business and put things in place to encourage foreign investment, they would see their economies grow. But they're just sort of clueless. And the only thing that we can do is, I know some governments try to put the pressure on them to, encourage this. And, if you want this money, you're going to have to do this, to encourage business. But the aid community certainly tries to influence these governments, but in the end, and it just seems so obvious to everyone else that this would have a really, snowballing effect. And they're very complacent, and they just don't.
Yeah, but I think that there's two streams here, aren't there? There's the kind of the micro businesses that require the investment in those, so crafts and vegetables and stuff like that. The investment in those is one of time by the founder. I'm going to weave a bowl out of straw, and I'm going to sell that bowl. So I've turned straw, which in that form is pretty much valueless, into something that has value. Or I've taken a tree and I've carved it into a mask. So again, I've taken something which is valueless and I've created value by investing my time in it. And whilst those things are great ideas. They require, I guess, for the large part, they require a constant flow of tourists like you and me to buy those things, those craft items, or they're relying on other equally poor people to buy the vegetables that they're growing. So there's a limit to how that can scale. But there's a terrible irony to the fact that many of the countries where this happens are countries that are abundant with natural resources. So, the Congo, for example, is the only place on the world where you can mine lithium. So actually, it shouldn't be US and G7 corporations that are doing that. It should be local businesses. I've got a plot of land. I'm going to dig up some, insert valuable natural resource here, because that keeps, it's like the fair trade coffee movement and stuff like that, where more of the money is making its way back to the people that are doing the work rather than the endless exploitation of these people. So is that something that should be or can be addressed?
Yeah, that's
or
a really...
what that I would actually add on to that is if that it comes into play when these local governments are looking whether or not they want the foreign investment, because if they assume that these big gigantic corporations are just going to come in and mine all of their natural resources and not pay their people fairly and all of those things, I would think that also has an impact on how they treat the foreign investments.
But that's also about corruption, isn't it? Because if I'm the local government person in that region, and a corporation says, I'm going to pay you 20 years' salary every month in order for you to sign this off and allow this to happen. Given that in many instances, these are countries where the people have grown up with nothing, and the only way they have been able to survive is by being on the very edge of the law, in terms of grasping opportunities when they present themselves, no matter how nefarious those opportunities may be, then that's kind of programmed into people over time, isn't it? And then when you get an opportunity to provide for your family in a way that you never thought you would be able to, it's a brave person that says, actually, no, I don't want $1 million a month. What I want is $5 a month, and to continue to have to, sift out the corn from the wheat or whatever.
Yeah. It sort of defies logic. And I do know that companies that do want to invest, there's so much opportunity there. There's a lot of natural resources. There's so much opportunity there, but it costs a lot to deal with the risk involved. And some go in and they set aside money to deal with the risk. And you have to say, this is what I'm risking, and I understand that, and I'm going to go in anyway, and I'm going to do this. But it's a lot of it is the mentality, it's just, and it's hard to change that. And as outsiders, some countries are changing, and they're putting more of an emphasis on ways to encourage foreign investment. What can we do so that these people come and invest in the country? And when they do that, they create local jobs, and that's what's going to help the economy, not aid or something like that. So some of them are starting to come around to encouraging business and encouraging foreign business, but until they decide, to, like I said, make it a priority.
Yeah, I mean, as we talk about this, kind of, the complexities of this start to unfold. But I can't help thinking that what has happened since the beginning of time is that the developed world has gone into the developing world and has raped it of its natural resources and of its peoples.
Yeah.
So we've seen it with slavery, we see it with the exploitation for everything from coal and diamond mining to precious metals and rare earth metals. And what happens is, and commodities like coffee and salt,
Yeah.
and whatever. And what happens is, I come into your country and I deliberately rip you off. And the reason that I'm able to do that is because I've got lots of money and you've got very little money, and I can pay you a fraction of what the stuff is worth because it seems like a lot of money to you. But there are some significant macro problems that are caused by this behavior. So when you think about the US, for example, now, whether or not immigration across the southern border is an issue or not, it's a possibility. And the reason it's a possibility is that the people south of the border are poor, and America looks like a land of opportunities. Now, you can either deal with that problem, and I say that it's equally the same in this country with boats coming across the English Channel and whatever. You can deal with that either by building a really big wall between the two nations, or a wall around the UK as an island, or having machine guns at every opportunity to shoot people that try to come into your country, or you make the country they're coming from better, and then there's no requirement or desire for people to leave. Because for you to move from the country you were born in and you grew up in and to an entirely alien world requires a huge amount of bravery, and there must be a pretty compelling reason for you to do that. So if there's no jobs, no food, no opportunities, no healthcare in your nation, you're going to want to go to America or the UK or France. If, however, your nation is better than my nation, you're not going to want to come to my nation because it would be seen as a punishment rather than a joy. And yet we continue to behave in this way, where as long as I pay 10p less for my cup of coffee, that's a win, irrespective of the damage that happens in your coffee growing country. Yeah. But how are big issues like this addressed? Because partly this is potentially a governmental thing, but equally it's a grassroots thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. And the fact that these refugees or these people coming over the borders, they don't want to leave their country. They don't. They want to stay where they are. They're forced. If there's no food or no jobs or no whatever, you have to find that somewhere in order to survive. I just don't think there's two things. I don't know that how much we can influence a government that's driving them out. Again, it's corruption, it's selfishness on the part of the government. They don't care, how many people they kill in Syria, for example. They're driving everyone out and they don't care. It's somebody else's problem. So, that's one thing. On the consumer side of it, yes, and we're famous in the United States for paying as least as possible for things. And, maybe we've been programmed that way, but we find it hard to pay a little bit extra for something that's sourced properly and encourages proper, manufacture and profits and things like this. And it goes on. These are big things. Yeah, I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
On that note, I want to bring the conversation from the macro view back to that frontline view. Let me start with this. Why is the startup approach I've been coaching ventures here in the US not going to translate to ventures in developing countries? What are you coaching them differently?
With the entrepreneurs I work with, the ones at the very bottom, like I said, there's a spectrum of entrepreneurs. There's the ones at these little teeny tiny businesses that we were talking about before. There's there's medium-sized companies, and then there's these high-tech, sophisticated companies that compete globally, and they could be anywhere. The ones I deal with at the bottom, I have to coach them on a very basic level. It's a matter of the amount of hand holding they need and the type of coaching. I have to bring everything down very, very basic. For example, many of these entrepreneurs, they don't keep business records, or they don't keep accurate business records, financial records. And when I start with one of them, the first thing we look at is their finances. In many cases, they're not keeping records at all. They have no idea on earth what's coming in and what's going out. None. They don't know if they're making money or losing money. And then so we start with that, and we start to look at what their expenses are and what they're bringing in. Usually I wound up having bad news for them. They're working so hard and they're losing money and they don't know it. Or they're mixing their business and their household finances. It's very common as well. So I bring everything down to like a checkbook level. This is what's coming in, and this is what you're spending. And most of the time, they know exactly the sales they made in their head, but they're not keeping track of their expenses, and that's where they get tripped up. And it's also it's that, and it's just hand holding them through complex business issues and meeting them where they're at on a they don't know what a target market, for example, is. Who are you selling to? Everybody. No, it's not everybody. um, and so I have to start at a very basic, like I said, and make things very plain and simple. And they're learning these concepts in the context of their own business. It's not effective to go in and do a market training or do a workshop on business plans. You have to work with them on their business and show them how to do it on their business. Then they can generalize beyond that. But when I work with them, we're working on their business. What's their market? Where are they selling it? Where are their problems? And then they start to learn the thinking processes needed in order to manage, how to make good decisions, how to evaluate things, what to think about. So it's a matter really of meeting them where they're at and hand holding, gentle, patient hand holding.
Just a question on that, because access to funding for is the same, regardless where you are. I suspect where you are starting your business. I've read a lot about microfinancing, and is it something that you've been experiencing, and what's your experience of that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of controversy around microfinance, and it can work, and sometimes it doesn't. It leaves them, worse off than where they were before. On the downside, the criticism is that they charge exorbitant interest rates in order to cover the risk. Like they're paying 30% interest and things like this. And in other cases, it's worked very well to get a small business off the ground. And we're talking micro. We're talking about like $50, $100. That's the loan. And there's a lot of discussion about and I've seen some models where they don't do that. They just simply grant them the money. Okay, here's $200 to start your business, no strings attached, and that gets them going. So micro, I have run into it. There are times where it can work, and there's other times where it's been abused or misused or not used properly.
Okay. And I would think too, from I know especially in developed countries, when you have a tech business, kind of the anticipated go-to-market strategy is that you get funding, right? You find an investor, they give you $1 million, you build your product, and then you can sell it. I think that's a very common mindset for specifically tech startups in developed countries. And I'm wondering what we can learn from the developing countries in their capacity to not have access to that, right? I have this thing, I want to do it, and I don't have access to someone else to give me money, or maybe I have $200. I don't have $1 million. And I can imagine that creates a more creative atmosphere for like, what can we do? How can we do that? And a greater potential for bootstrapped sales coming in. So I'm wondering if there's anything that we can learn from those organizations in that capacity.
Yeah, interesting question. So these businesses, they are bootstrapped. Sometimes the entrepreneur will borrow some money from a friend or a relative to get started. So they need either have to save some money or get it somewhere to just buy raw materials to get started. However, they don't grow into the companies that we know. And they'll grow enough to be able to provide a decent income for themselves, for their families, pay their school fees. There's no public schools in these places, so they have to pay fees for their children to go to school. And so they'll never be, many of these will never be job creators. They may have one or two people, like we know, like, a successful business creates a lot of jobs. And you can only grow so far without financial injection. And so they'll get to a certain point. Like I'm working with one now, and she's got herself a very good, profitable business, but now she needs to make her product at a larger scale. And so she's looking for funding to do that. And they don't qualify. They don't have the collateral to qualify for a loan. So that's pretty much out of the question. In most cases, there are more and more grant programs now by NGOs and aid programs and foundations and things like this, where they'll compete for a grant, and that's where they get a lot of funding in order to just get off the stagnant part where they are, to grow their business. So I don't know that there's that much we can learn, other than you can start a business with very little, but it's not going to grow very much unless you, usually, not always, but usually you reach a point where you need financing. And this is where a lot of the growth stops. And there's a lot of talk in the industry about creative financing and creative ways to finance such an entrepreneur. Maybe you can finance them through their accounts receivable. Like if they have a steady accounts receivable and you know that they can pay off a certain amount, you do it that way. I have heard of funding for, women have it even worse in terms of being entrepreneurs. And the basis for the decision to lend them money was the fact that they paid their cell phone, payments on time. Like as long as they could show somehow that they pay, that they're reliable and pay that way. So there's a lot of creative, looking at creative ways to help these businesses grow.
So we often look at how we can help developing nations develop. So
Yeah.
you supporting entrepreneurship. There must be a huge amount we can learn from how they overcome these adversities and things that they're struggling with. So what can they feed back into how we do things in the developed world?
To me, the biggest thing is creative approaches. And you don't know how creative you can be until you don't have something and you need it.
Yeah.
And I just think, we always think of these, businesses that were built on creative ideas, and they, huge businesses. But these people are very creative on a local level, and you have to get creative. I was working with one small business. It was during COVID, and she was having trouble getting raw materials in. In many of these countries, they have to import everything. Stuff that could be made there isn't. And so you're relying on importing. And she had a shipper who was not very good, and she couldn't get the materials she needed to make her product. And at one point, she ran out of money. And she was stuck. And we were like, what do we do now? She can't make anything because this shipment was lost. And so, we did some brainstorming, and I said, is there something that you can make with materials that you have? She was in the beauty care products. With the materials you have that you can sell in order to just get some money together, and then, order some more business. And it turned out there was something she could make. She had a recipe for something else using local materials. So she happened to have some packaging left, and she made and sold that. And we positioned it as a limited edition product, so that if it didn't sell, it goes away. If it did sell, it would become part of her product line. And so to me, the answer to that is you can learn a lot about creativity and how to get what you need.
One of the things you mentioned a little while ago now was some of the basics of marketing, like understanding the target audience, for example. How do cultural differences impact business practices in developing countries?
Yeah, you have to work with the culture that you're working with, and they know their culture better than I do. And so I spend a lot of time exploring what's acceptable in their culture. I know business principles, I know marketing principles, but we apply the ones that that apply to their situation. Promotion, for example. Radio promotion is a very common way in some of the African countries to get the word out, and it's very, very cheap. And so we sometimes use that to promote, where we wouldn't really think of that here. They're also using social media. You know, they see what's going on. They hire influencers, just like we do here. And so while some of the concepts are transferable, you do have to take into account what's doable there and what isn't, and what money they have and what's accepted. In many, what I've seen in Africa is they're very used to a hard sell. Somebody screaming at you to buy something, that to us would be like, cringeworthy, but that's what they're used to and accustomed to. So
Donna,
adaptation.
yeah, Donna, just a quick question. You said in your example, you said she. How many entrepreneurs are actually women? Do you see a different trend?
Yeah, it depends where you're at. In farming, for example, the majority are women. People don't really understand that, but the majority are women. In other industries, the majority are men, like tech, digital businesses. So it really depends. Much of the work I do and much of the focus in the aid community and in foundations focuses on women. So there's a lot of resources being put toward encouraging women entrepreneurs. And so for that reason, I work with quite a few, because they've identified these are the people that we need to help. They face huge hurdles, more so than men. They all have it hard. The infrastructure thing that goes along, everybody. But in some cases, there are laws that prevent women from owning land. They have to get, permission to get a loan. That's all changing now. Their husbands are making, this is a cultural thing, their husbands are making all the monetary decisions and they don't have a say. A lot of times their husbands are not in favor of the women having a business. And if she does have a business, she's got to do that in addition to all the family obligations, which take up a lot more time than, she's got to do the hand washing and cooking all the meals and things. So she's got to do that business on top of all that. She's got to walk a couple of miles to get the water, because it's a woman's job to get water. And so the women have it way harder. And again, it depends. I hate generalizing, but it depends where you're at. But just in general, they don't have access to finance. Banks don't want to loan to them, or they need their husband's signature. And they don't, there's a lot of just cultural attitudes toward this isn't something women can't or should be doing.
It's amazing listening to this, because it's we cannot begin to appreciate the challenges that they're facing, can we? It's just simple things like, you walk into a room and you turn the light on, or you want to buy something and you haven't got enough money, and you just phone the bank up and say, I want you to give me some money. And the bank says, all right, then, how much do you want? And, for us, everything is so straightforward and simple. And, the concept of starting from zero, because even for the most part in the Western world, when you're starting with no funding, well, you have got funding. You can get hold of money relatively easily, and normally you have a degree of runway, don't you? It's not like I'm starving to death, so I need to grow some food. It's like, well, I don't need to earn anything for 6 months, so that 6 months I can use to set up the business and get going. And these people are starting from a much lower baseline, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. It's a different set of issues here. Here, someone starts a business, they're able to get off the ground, and then they go looking for larger financing, and then it gets competitive. Like you hear stories about, large companies that got started that, they're going from VC to VC to, and not being able to get the money to grow. So it's a different set of problems. But yeah, I mean, it's just stuff that we don't think about. But we have other problems in the West, like I said. I can think of one company, a story of a woman who was starting a cosmetics company, and she was going from investor to investor to investor, and making her pitch, and nobody wanted to invest in her. So they have those problems too. They're just different.
Yeah. So I guess as we're getting towards the end of our time, is this something that we can actually hope to address, or are we putting a sticking plaster on an altogether bigger problem? And so I guess what I'm saying is this something where we can actually start to make a difference, do you think?
The reason why I love my job so much is that the little things make such a huge difference. When I'm working with a micro entrepreneur and they have no knowledge of anything, it takes very little for them for the light bulb to go off. They're like little sponges. They want to learn everything, everything they can, and they want, they're driven by, they need the money. So I make little teeny differences all the time. And if I can get that one business into a profit position, and they can go forward and sell their product and grow their business, I'm happy. And then I do it with the next business, and then I do it with the next one. So I think you can make a difference if you give them the help that they need and not treat it like a metric. Like, oh, we did a workshop where we did a training for 500 entrepreneurs. We checked off that box, and we're done. To me, you just wasted a lot of money.
Yeah.
And there's a mentality of, well, it takes too much, it's too costly to work with entrepreneurs at this level. But that's where you're going to get your returns. And if they can feed their family, if they can pay the school fees, if they can put a better roof over their head, to me, that's success. And you do it one. It's like that story of the starfish. The kid, you probably heard of that. The kid throwing the starfish into the ocean, and the man walks up and says, "Why are you doing that?" And he said, "Well, they washed up, and I'm putting them back in the ocean." And the man says, "That's not going to help. Look at all these starfish." And he said, "Well, and the little boy says, "Well, it made a difference to that one." So if you were the one that were making, if you were the one that was being helped, and you're making money all of a sudden. To me, that's a big deal.
Yeah,
so, yes.
Absolutely.
So Donna, at the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned that this industry is growing, helping and supporting this level of entrepreneurs, that there are people who are watching this episode and are interested in doing a similar kind of work or getting involved somehow. What is a good next step for them?
Yeah, so they can contact me if they're looking for help as far as, I want to do something here. I have a company, I have a whatever. How do I help these entrepreneurs? Do not attempt to go it on your own. Get some local help, someone who knows the terrain, for example. And what I'm seeing more now is, there used to be just at least in the aid industry, there was technical assistance and there may be some financial assistance. But that missing piece was the business support. And so you can teach a farmer how to irrigate properly, and you can give him some money. But if he doesn't know how to manage his business or her business, you just wasted all. They're going to go under. And so there's a realization now that you need to provide this business support. And once you do that, then you've the private sector it realized, to them it's obvious, but it has been less obvious in other places. So there's foundations like the MasterCard Foundation, and they provide the whole package. And there's a lot of organizations doing really good work to encourage these businesses.
Donna, this has been great.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much. How can people get to know you more? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I'm active there. So shoot me a message there. You can go, I have two websites. My business website is e4enterprises.com. That is obviously one word all spelled out, EFOUR. You can go to donnamrosa.com to read more about me, about some of the adventures that I've had in these countries. It's more about my background and my thoughts. So I have a business. You can contact me through either of those websites or on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to help. I offer, a free consultation. So
Fantastic.
get a hold of me. Yeah.
So we now have a newsletter. Don't miss an episode. Get show highlights, beyond the show insights, and reminders of upcoming episodes. You can scan the QR code on screen, or you can visit us at digitaldownload.live and click on newsletter. On behalf of the panelists, to our guest, to our audience, thank you all for another fantastic discussion, and we'll see you next time on the